culture.
Mind your culture.
My culture.
Culture and mind.
This is the podcast for the culture.
Hi, and welcome to another Mind Culture podcast. This is an episode with Michael Loizenbauer. He is an engineer, a digital artist, a photographer, and a videographer. We're going to talk about his process, about how you start with doing digital arts, and what is necessary to do in digital arts combining with performing arts. This podcast is possible thanks to the Viral Visions Erasmus Plus European collaboration project, as well as BMKOES Austria, and it is a part of Viral Art Meeting conference that we host in Vienna this year in 2022. So if you like what you hear, please consider subscribing, clicking the like button, and let's begin. You submitted 3 works to the exhibition, and I'm really curious if you could tell me a little bit about them. One was with ants, one was with some kind of musical installation and some kind of organisms, and the other one was with photography. So if you could maybe tell me a little bit like how you work and what is driving you.
So why I sent you this work is these 3 works. So the main topic for this event was media strategies, and for me an important way of approaching artwork is to make it not the artwork per se, but the instruments you use for your artwork to have accessible, computers, whatever. So accessible in a way that they are affordable, so that you don't work with computers that cost thousands of euros. But everybody can do it, so everybody can afford a Raspberry Pi.
So like cheap and cheaper solutions, open source solutions, things that you don't have to invest so much in, but you can start making.
So the Raspberry Pi is the cost is less than 100 euros. Let's say with all the things around it, it's about 100 euros, and then you have a full computer to work on, based on mostly on Unix. Depends on what you set up, but based on Linux or open software. And this is why I choose these 3 works. I do also stuff to well, the work with the photos was done on the computer, not with the Raspberry. But the others, so Siblings That Never Met and the Empire, that where the concept is from Roland Mauermeier, was done on Raspberries, and this is the reason why. It's also the situation we have in producing art. We don't have the big money if you don't have the family behind you, and you can do a lot with this Raspberry Pis. They're super flexible, and yeah. So the other thing is I'm interested, as I wrote you already, in autonomous machines. So you turn them on and they run. You don't have to do anything, and then they do their stuff. So therefore, that's most of the things are somehow randomly based, or as I did especially with the Siblings That Never Met, to explain the work a bit. So it began with reading texts of artworks and having a bit fun, because often you need a dictionary of foreign words. And I thought I try to keep it simple, my things, and readable. But I don't want to make fun out of that. But sometimes it's a bit funny in itself. So this made me think about doing a work with this. So I did interviews with artists, regular interviews about the artwork and their approach, as we do it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew what I wanted to do with the material, so they didn't take it too serious also.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me through the process? So, like, what were you asking them, and how were you gathering the information, and what was the process?
It's really as we do it. What is your work you do, and how is your approach to art? Exactly the same thing. And then I made this installation with the Raspberry Pi. So I had a laboratory table. On the laboratory tables, I had glasses with small animals, Drosophila, water fleas, whatever, and I tracked them with the Raspberry Pi. I tracked them. So there were 3 stations: this laboratory table, then you could see the tracking on a screen, and then there was this audio station where the interviews from the artists were played somehow, because the movement of the small animals, the water fleas or the Drosophila, they produced signals. By tracking them, they produced signals.
Mm-hmm.
And with these signals, I controlled the interviews. So I started and stopped them at a certain randomly position. So they were really torn apart and produced a new line of meaning.
Wow.
So this was the idea, and then worked brilliant. And it's also the way we see, hear things, what we do with it. This was this playing around with meaning.
So you basically use the, let's say, the technology as some kind of trigger or like remix station for the materials of the interviews.
Exactly, the small animals
Mm-hmm.
were used as this, yes.
Wonderful.
And I used to the technology to give them the capability to do it.
How do you come up on an idea like this? Sorry to interrupt you.
Well,
I'm
it
curious.
started. Mhm.
Yeah.
It started with this empire thing, where we. This is a concept by Roland Mauermeier. So he came up with the idea that he wanted to ants to build their own virtual anthill by playing Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
These falling stones where you have to move them and fit them into the situation. And he asked me if I can do this, if I can program a tracker, and yeah. For the ants, we also had other sensors to measure the movements of the ants, and then other triggers for the stones. Yeah, and then when I was working on this tracking, I thought to myself, so I should use this more, because it makes sense to play around with it. And
Sure.
then the siblings that never met.
Wonderful. And the last work with the photo?
This was a cooperation with Akemi Takeya. So she's a performer in Vienna and around the world. We were working already for some pieces together. And then she had a series of called Lemonism, where she played around with what was it, cubism, for example, and art. Art. I'm a bit tired today.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. Some art, something to do with lemon, something to do with. But I'm more curious not about like what specific art it is, but maybe what is the technological approach. So basically, like how you translate this, what you do, like the process into what you do.
While we started to work on this Lemonism project, I started as a more or less as a quite regular camera operator. And then we worked on, and then I had to build some stuff around this camera, I did some work on the way we screened it, I manipulated the image, and it went on like this. And then she came up with this idea of cubism. She wanted to perform cubism, and then we were talking, and so at the end it came out, what can we do with technology and cubism? So we cannot paint on the stage. That takes
Yeah.
too much time. But there is also a photocubism, a cubism field, and I said, yeah, well, I'm a photographer, and let's try it this way.
Wonderful.
So, and then I wrote the program, and this was quite challenging because it was standalone. So it was me on stage, also performing with Akemi as a photographer, taking pictures from several angles, a few pictures, sending them live and in real time via wireless to my computer. So this was quite challenging. That works. Then the computer had to pick up the images and calculate a cubistic image out of it, and then project it while I'm on stage, and nobody was controlling the computer.
Wonderful.
And so the interesting part of this work was, on the one side, the technology to get it working without having someone sitting there and controlling it. And so this is quite technology related. But on the other side, we had to find out how we, so this is more the artistic approach, how to deal with the photos we take on stage, that we get out a really photocubistic image, so that it's not random something, but really at the end have a very clear photocubistic work presented.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I'm really curious because you say you describe yourself as an engineer, but you're also a photographer, and I'm wondering, like, you work in Liquid Loft, and also you work with Akemi, and you work with a lot of choreographers and artists that do performance, and I'm wondering, what do they usually ask you to do? Like, what's the
Well, most of them want me to document their piece.
Yeah. And when when does it become interesting for you?
Well, the work with Akemi was really interesting because I could bring together my skills on quite lots of levels. So that makes it interesting. So everything you learned and experienced in your life, bringing together in a work, and that makes it interesting. And then I did some quite different things in my life, and bringing them together is not so easy. But with Akemi, it worked quite well. And work has to be challenging, and somehow it should not be boring, and then finding solutions for problems you create on your own. This is a nice thing to do.
And let's say, what of these things that you do, like, gives you a satisfaction? Like, what's the part that gives you satisfaction? Let's put it like this. Like, what's the fun part of doing it, and why you decide to stay in the arts? Why did you decide to do arts and not something else? That's question mark.
I cannot really answer this question. It happened somehow. So I'm perhaps I can answer the question why I'm in the performing arts. So I was also at the directing class at the Reinhardt Seminar. So very theater related. And in the end of 90s, I started to photograph performances, dance performances.
Uh-huh.
And I also was working with a group from the Reinhardt Seminar as a dancer and actor. And it more and more tended to dance and performance. And this was the place I simply felt most comfortable. It's for me one of the most creative and unregulated spaces we have. And then we have a quite vital scene in Vienna, I would say. Also with the Impulstanz Festival, and on a really on a high level, on also on the lower level.
Wonderful.
And then the theater was too regulated. The form was too
Defined, maybe.
yes.
Okay.
And
And
somehow still it is. So, but I'm open to it, of course, and I'm interested to work in this field. But yeah, my home base is definitely performance and dance.
yeah, I think it with the theater it depends country by country, because when I think, for example, about Polish, because I'm from Poland, so the Polish theater is like, I would consider it like very progressive, whereas
Yeah.
like I think here in Vienna maybe theater is more classical, but maybe performance, as you say, is more progressive, whereas
Yeah.
in other places it's less progressive. So I think it's interesting that you choose this specific field because it is so open. I think it's great. Can you tell me a little bit about photography? Like, because you said you were photographing dance and performance. I'm a little bit a photographer. I would say that it's my passion, has always been my passion. But I would love to hear from you, from other people who do it maybe for longer. Like, what's the exciting or interesting thing about making photos of dance or movement, dance performance, and what are the challenges?
Well, on a very sportive, it's getting the right moment. Of course, it's quite challenging. So it started with this to get the right moment, to have this perfect image. And as I was also studying sports, I had a quite good sense of anticipation for the movement. So this helped me when they were jumping, so more in the classical fields, that I can get them really on the point. And I started with Laurent Ziegler. He's a great photographer.
So you work together with him?
In the late 90s, yeah. And then I started to study visual media, digital arts, and I get a very different approach to art in a whole. Yeah.
Did it change your photography, or did you continue with photography, or you left photography after this? Because I'm trying to get myself into photographing more dance and performance, and I find it's very beautiful, but I'm wondering, I'm wondering also, how do you create your own style and all this, questions of a photographer? Like, I mean, technical things I understand, like I understand how to catch the right moment, let's say, or how to, because I do dance, or how to set up the camera so the pictures are not blurry or horrible, but that's not a problem. But I'm wondering about, like, how do you develop your own style? How do you get interested? How do you stay interested in doing it? And or maybe did you stay interested in doing it? Like, what kept you doing it? And are you doing
But
it still?
it depends. Sometimes it's more interesting, sometimes less, and sometimes it's just nice to have the skill to really a proper classical photo. As I did it, for example, in Linz the last times, where I was on one side an artist for the project on stage, and because I was there, I also did and knew the piece. I also was asked to do the photos. but in that case we did more classical photos. So I really still like to do it very proper and classical on one side. On the other side, I also like it to work together with I don't know, choreographers, dancers, and find out a way what the photo should be. So they also give me a different point of view to the whole thing, and I think that's it. That's so there's not one style I sell, more or less. So I'm interested in this working together and finding out and what the piece, what the situation needs.
Yeah, that's really, I think the collaborative aspect is very interesting also in any kind of art making, or I think in anything, any aspect of anything. But yeah, thanks for this, because I'm still how to say, I'm still struggling to find, my way to do it. But I think this is a nice advice. Like, just talk with the people, I guess, and figure out if we can find a common language. Maybe, if I understand you right.
Yeah, I think struggling is a good way to to go ahead.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I want to make a plaidoyer for the ever. Let it happen, and yeah.
And could you tell me a little bit like about the jump? So let's say there is photography, and then there's, I understand the next step is the video. Uh, I would imagine, like, what is for you the step from doing photography to doing video? Like, what would be how would you describe the difference between those two, or how would you describe your approach also in the artistic context?
I don't think so much about it, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, because I'm used to. I'm taking photos since I'm a little child, so this is a lot of this. Of course, I'm taking pictures. But what else should I do here?
Right.
And then they started to move. Um, what I did with my first video work, I wanted to do on film, not on video.
Mm-hmm.
So this was important for me to.
When you say film, you mean like the analog strip of
Exactly,
film?
exactly. Black and white was 8 mm. So this was the medium I knew from photography. So I was a lot in the darkroom and so on. And then before I really wanted to play around with a video camera, a digital one, I wanted to have this in between tryout with analog film.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot really tell you how it happened. So it was obvious somehow. The photos, they simply don't move. They're done with the moment you took it, and
Yeah, I also feel like this. I also feel like I've always loved photography, and I always loved I don't know, the idea of catching the moment, and somehow like the feeling that I have when I do the video but it is the same. Like, it is the same kind of idea of, okay, you have to compose the frame, and you have to, I don't know, find the lighting, find the, good angle, and just think about how you put things together. But in the end, the only difference is it is moving. And sometimes I feel like, because it is moving, uh, it is more difficult. But sometimes, because it is moving, it is more easy. Because, yeah, why is it more difficult? Because you have to follow what's happening, and you have to, how to say, make these split-second decisions. And when the moment is gone, it's gone. But it's also, I find it more easy because, how to say, I can follow, like, in my mind, some strategies that I have for following movements, so I can kind of think less than when I'm doing photography. I don't know if it makes any sense. So, like, because it's video, I can say, okay, now I do a panning shot, or now I follow this character, or like it's like the composition, you have to make it, but it's almost, there are some strategies that help it to make it like intuitively and easily, and it's almost sometimes more technical and less, whereas like for
Yeah,
photo, it's more I don't know, defined or profound. Like the moment has to be perfect. It's more meaningful almost. But I wonder what is the experience for
yeah,
you.
yeah. I would agree. It's meaningful, um, and the photo stands more for itself. It's
Mm-hmm.
this one single thing that's on your screen, on the wall, wherever. With a video film, you have to lead through. You have to direct it. You have to give it somehow a meaning
Mm-hmm.
by choosing technical aspects like panning, whatever, editing, making a cut here and there, and so on. But perhaps because it's a funny story, that how I started to work with video, because I'm a skiing addict, so I was skiing a lot in I don't know, in my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also skiing instructor, and when the cheap video cameras came up, we started to film ourselves skiing somewhere up in the mountains. And then we had some material, and I thought, okay, let's do something out of it. I mean, we have the good quality pictures, and I started to edit a video.
Mm-hmm.
And we showed this at the university. So there's a sports club at the university, and we presented the video. And they liked it so much that they asked me to do more stuff for different sports. And so I said, okay, let's try it. Why not? Let's see what's getting out.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to do camera work, more camera work, and got money for it.
Wonderful. Could you tell me a little bit, like maybe speaking of this, before we continue, I'm curious about like how it was back then, because you say like you started, filming skiing. I imagine it was far less accessible back then, and I'm wondering how it is now. Are you there?
uh,
So, oh, sorry, I thought your camera froze for a second.
no, it was me. It was
It
me.
was you. Sorry. I was like, oh shit. No, but no, my question is like, if you had to start today, like, would you feel the same motivation? Because it's so easy now to make videos. Like, you just take your phone, make videos. Like, I could argue that everyone makes videos. So I'm wondering, like, what's the access then, and what's the access now?
Yeah, to be honest, I tend a bit more to theory
Mm-hmm.
the older I get. Because it's a bit challenging. This competitive situation with everybody has her own media studio on the cell phone. So it's quite inflational, the appearance of photos and videos, and we're surrounded with. Yeah, but it's not. It doesn't influence too much. So there's video works in situations where they make sense. So I always question: does it make sense? Isn't it better without? But there are situations where it definitely makes sense, and then it's just a regular approach.
Can you
What can we do?
elaborate with this idea of making sense?
Now, for example, we had. I want to mention a project I do with Thomas Jelinek, where we're bringing it's a discussion format that is live in the theater and also a stream. So it's all recorded and then done live for the net. And there, of course, we have to do it with cameras, and this is clear to work with this technology. And to find out what can we do with this technology to have a medium that transports the idea behind it. So the idea is to have a discussional format for science and arts, discussing topics that are concerning today.
And where does it not make sense?
For example, when you do a performance in it and puts a layer on the performance, that doesn't give more meaning to it, or is confusing. Or because I'm doing a lot of documentation work, so I really want to do my documentation work without an art approach, because I want to do it. I simply want to have a good work done,
Right.
without my personal meaning to it, because that is not necessary. The artwork is done. This needs just the documentation of it. So what my approach is to this, whatever performance, it's not interesting. It's simply not interesting. It's interesting that I do a good camera job and a good editing job. That's it.
So you're able to separate this well.
Hopefully,
yourself.
yes. Yeah.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay. And what is the, like, can you tell me a little bit about the jump from doing, let's say, doing photo and video to doing digital, I don't know what, processing, let's call it processing, with the things that you do with Raspberry Pi, all the programming that you do, like, how is this jump like? Like, did you have to learn like crazy amount of coding, or did you have to like invest countless hours learning things, or is it something difficult? Do you have to have a passion for it? How could you describe this kind of shift?
Well, that was never a shift, because I went to a technical school. So I started to program when I was, I don't know, 15. So quite young, and quite a time before the digital natives came up. So I was used to program, and I always did it. Of course, you spend you spend a lot of time.
It is a very different kind of programming back then and now. Like, it's like the frameworks are different, the programming languages are different.
Not so much. No. Well, there are different concepts, but that is too technical right now. There are different concepts, but we also programmed in C, so you still have this language, you know. And then I prefer Python as a language, for example. This is based on C, C++. It's a super handy language, and intuitive language to program with. And it's perfect for Raspberry Pi.
And if someone doesn't know the language, like what would be the process to get into these things?
Well, I was discussing this with a university, because they wanted to have some JavaScript framework to learn the students programming. And I said, I don't want to teach them this framework, because when we do it in Python, because it's you can do it on a really light level. You can work with Python very easily, and you can do really, really powerful stuff. So you have everything you need, and it's not so much about the language. It's a lot about understanding the concepts.
The algorithm
Um,
and
not even algorithms, but this basic ideas of how you approach a language.
can you explain it? I have an idea of what you're talking about, but I think it would be really interesting to compare a little bit like a normal language to a programming language. I think it's like, let's say I'm familiar with certain ideas, but I'm wondering if you could name like 2, 3 concepts that you have to understand in order to program.
Good question. I should know this, but I didn't program now for. I'm an on-demand programmer, so I know it when I need it.
Right. So maybe the first concept is to just use Google to search for the answers that you don't know.
No, exactly not, because there are really basic concepts. Starting with a super simple thing, an if question in a language. You have to understand it, what it does. Yeah. You don't need a specific language that for you, but this is a concept.
So if this, then this. If
Or going in a loop.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. So these are the very foundations of programming.
And is there more?
And then it gets more and more complicated. So this changed over time. So you have this parallel calculation now, where you really have to take care what is processed first. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah, I think I stopped my programming skills at understanding the concept of if and the concept of for. I don't know. So the things that you just said, and I think when it came to like ideas like pointers and I don't know what are this other thing called anymore, but basically like when you start addressing the addresses and not the things themselves, then I already like I checked out a little bit. I understand it conceptually, but I wouldn't be able to use it. Like, and I think this was for me a big jump. Like the understanding the concept of a loop or the concept of like the question. I think this is very simple. But when it comes to understanding the way you address the machine, so it's a little bit like when you have to understand where things are being stored in a memory of a program, then it becomes more complicated because you suddenly have to understand how the machine works. I have the feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't use so you this is a very C specific. So with Python you don't have the problem with pointers, and I also take care to not use them because it's really I have to come up with a result in a defined time. I understand it, of course, because we were programming this in school, and we were not programming computers, but chips. So that makes it quite easy to understand, to have this one defined memory, and you have this list of addresses in there. And
can you tell me a little bit?
Then you have to just.
Can you tell me a little bit about the interfacing of things? Let's say, because I understand, let's say I have my own Raspberry Pi, but I'm wondering, there's some pins, there are some connectors on it, and I'm wondering like what are the interesting, or let's say not interesting, but common ways or like intuitive ways to connect things with each other. So for example, if I have a camera, like if I have a sensor, if I have of some kind of sensor, or if I have I don't know, a computer, like what would be like to understand how you connect this little machine to other things? What are the ways? that you're using, maybe.
What do you need?
Yeah.
I always would ask you, what do you need? So you shouldn't forget. So when I say I went to a technical school, it took 5 years of training in power supply engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm used to think in this way. So for me, it's totally normal to connect things. I don't have to think so much about it. Also, if I need a resistor, a diode, whatever, uh, I solder it and what I need yeah. So if you're new to this topic, then of course you have. I mean that there are brilliant people, for example, at the digital art class. They started from zero and did in little time perhaps more sophisticated things that I did. But what I know is that this approach of having this training of 5 years with this material is a lot of help and makes a lot of things that you no longer think about what you do, because it's of course
Mm-hmm.
it's you don't think about it. So this is why you train things. This is why you train dance, because you cannot stop on stage and think, okay, how do I move next?
Yeah, but you have to know
Is
that.
my body capable of it doing it?
Yeah.
You do it and then you don't think about it.
But
So
it's really hard to find someone like you, someone that did study engineering and is interested in doing art. Like it's not so simple, and especially if all your friends are just dancers or just artists. And how do you even connect? How do you even fish for those people that are interested in doing it? So maybe one of the solutions is the reason why I'm asking, because maybe one of the solutions is just maybe learning it by yourself. But of course, it would be best to find people like you, but I don't think it's very common. It's I would say it's rare to.
well, they are around some.
Where do you find
But as
them?
I said, it's not the only way to do it. I mean, that is, especially for me, it helps me um, when there are technical issues, to have this way of thinking to come up with a solution
Hmm. Can you tell me like about a little bit about your interest and maybe the development of the field? Like for example, like I understand you're interested in building autonomous kind of systems that do some kind of interpretation of data and they can run by their own. But I'm wondering like what is your outlook on things that have two letters in their acronyms, so like AR, VR, or AI. I'm wondering, how do you see yourself in it, and what is your outlook to these new technologies? Arguably new.
a difficult question,
Thank you.
because you can answer them on various levels. It's also what do you want to hear. I mean, we have, especially for the AI, we have this discussion about this general AI, what we just had last week. An alarming article in the news from I think it was a Google developer who thought that he saw some consciousness in the AI, whatever. I don't see it at the moment, and as it is also discussed in the media theory, um, we had some technologies coming up in the 90s and having a certain level of development in I don't know, beginning 2000s, and from then on it didn't develop so much. So there were a lot of applications built up on this base of technology, but the technology itself didn't develop too much. So all the concepts we now have out of years ago.
Like, for example?
When you have a look at your applications on the phone you use, or all this new media, social media stuff, this is all from around 2000 to 2005, I would say. So there's nothing new. Nothing new happened the last 17 years. It's just getting blown up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for every thing you have 1,000 apps. You don't know which one to choose because they're all doing more or less the same, and it's undistinguishable for you to see what's the difference between them, and all of them collecting data.
And I'm curious.
So this is perhaps.
I'm curious. Okay, so you say like from the user perspective now a little bit, but I'm wondering from the artist perspective. Like I can see that, let's say, AR technology is more accessible. There are some frameworks being developed that are, let's say, more like you can grab them. Maybe you can finally use them. Like that was for sure not possible in 2000. Like there wasn't technology to use AR, and there was also not so much technology to use VR, and even in artificial intelligence, like there was just not enough processing power to actually have like I've seen the images being generated based on words, and that's amazing that you can do it now, like really complex, interesting, artistic ish images. So I'm wondering if you're following those things, those developments, if any of this is interesting for you, and if yes, then how, and if not, then why.
So especially for VR, when you have been to Ars Electronica, for example, in the years 2000 around, there were already great works shown there. So I don't see this development in the depth of the VR. I see it in the quality of the output, and there I would agree that the images are better now. But the concepts behind, are they new? So this is the question. Are they really new? And for the AI, it may be a bit different. I agree. Even there, that the concepts are, it's not new. So AI is out of the 50s around this. But to really get it working, it started in the 80s, 90s. And for me, it's a bit difficult because I know the technique behind.
Right.
So this is I just was talking to a friend of mine yesterday about going to a concert, and I do not have this problem with theater, dance, and film, but especially with music concerts. I have the problem when I'm in there. I always wanted to be on my right place, and this is backstage. So I cannot listen to a concert without this being at work there.
Okay.
And this is a bit the same when I have a very technology-based art. So I always question, okay, what is the machine doing? Did the artists understand the way the machine works? And this is a discussion that is there is no solution, and I think to it. It's more what you prefer more. So is it okay to use commercial applications to do your artwork, or do you have to understand as a artist the whole process?
Like, is it
So,
humanly
and of course, because
possible? Is it even humanly possible with those things? Because there's multiple people involved usually when it's a complex thing.
yeah, but what is the message you're telling? Is then at a certain point, is then the technology behind telling more than you as an artist?
Well, that was always my impression when I went to Ars Electronica Center in, like, let's say, the first decade of 2000. I arrived to Linz, and that was exactly my impression. Like, what is it about the art, or is it about just showcasing the technology? And that was my, let's say, critique at the time, because of course I like, personally I love technology, but I'm also an artist, but my art is more based on movement. So I'm really curious, can I use the technology? And the reason why I never really use technology in my work, or not so much, is because, like, I can never find a place for it that will be justifiable, like from the theoretical art making point of view. And that was also my impression when I went in early 2000 to Ars Electronica Center. But then I heard from, like, artists like that were here on the panel on Sunday, Michaela Kawdańska, that she says that technology has evolved, like, not the technology, but the art making with technology has evolved a lot, and nowadays it's way more making sense. So it's becoming more mature, this process. So yeah, I wonder if you see it also like this, or what's your thought on this?
Yeah, I would agree. Um, and also stick to the question. It's not about good or bad.
Yeah.
It's just about this process questioning what we do. That's it. So I don't want to play this role and say that this is good art and this is bad art.
Yeah.
No,
But
definitely not.
then you need to have some kind of special mind to do this, because I understand, I understand being an artist of analog forms, let's say, being an artist of craft. I understand that. But then being an artist of technology, it's a completely different mindset, because in the way I see it, because you have to really, like, you really have to, like, for the majority of time, you have to actually be very technical in solving the problems. So I'm wondering, maybe it's my naive way of looking at it, and maybe there are so many geniuses in it. But if I think of my friends programmers, like, their outlook on, even if it's art making, their outlook on it, it's different. It's more concerned with problem solving. It's more concerned with, okay, how do we do this? Not so much about why do we do this, or, like, what do we do in general. So I wonder, how do you, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to you what I'm saying. Like, I feel like
If you
there is this theory of two sides of the brain, which is completely false. But there is this, it's a nice image, but there is this nice image of this one creative part of the brain and one problem solving part of the brain. Let's imagine that this distinction exists. Like, how do you switch between those two?
to go in a discussion,
Mm-hmm.
simply like that. So I have it in my person to being an educated artist and a trained engineer, so I have this both sides, and a skiing instructor.
Let's not forget
So
that.
how to bring this together? As I did it with this three works you mentioned in the beginning. So on the one side, I want to see that or show people that there's a technology behind it. On the other side, I want to tell them a story in a way
Mm-hmm.
where they can fall into,
Mm-hmm.
or with the laboratory table to start experimenting with. You have the water fleece, and then you make an exchange, and then you have the Drosophila in front of the lens, and it gives a different result to the audio station. And this is technology on one side, and it's a story on the other side. So
Mhm. I had maybe a related question. You say that you're an engineer. Engineers earn a lot of money. Why are you doing art?
to learn to earn even more money.
That is
No,
not true.
uh, uh, I cannot answer this question. So why did I start studying sports when I finished my technical education? So I'm interested in things, whatever.
Mhm. So what are you're interested in things like what channels do you use to learn about new things?
Any.
Mhm.
So what I really try at the moment is to get in touch with the younger generations, um, to see that their perspective. I don't, I'm out of a time when we had one in the student hostel, one phone on the floor, and we had to manage who calls, who phones, whatever. So this was a really social activity. And now you have at least one cell phone with you constantly around. So and then people who grew up with as digital natives, as we call them, from the 2000s on about, they have different view to the world, and I want to learn this view. I want to understand it because I cannot see it natively that way. So I want to get in touch with them and see their solutions to the problems around. This is one channel, for example. Then we have this normal channel. I also use a lot of YouTube tutorials.
Yeah.
So this is more the regular way to learn, but anything around is an instrument to learn,
Right.
I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also a big passionate of learning and learning anything I can, and it's just the only thing that I see standing in my way is maybe the resource of time. Like that's the most how to say resource of time, and when it comes to learning movement, at least resource of energy too. But it's mostly the time. Like the if I can, like the beautiful thing about doing art is that somehow you can combine the learning with something that is uh, useful for the certain project. So you can use the projects of art making for learning. But generally, if I want to combine learning and management, it becomes more difficult because there's things that you have to do, there's things that you're passionate of doing, and that's
Yeah, but then there comes the age and the experience, and some things uh, get more easy,
Mhm.
and others not, of course.
Right.
So
Cool.
yeah,
Uh, if you if you had any advice for people who wanna do something that you do, like what would be your advice? So let's say you have someone who loves your work and wants to do work like you do. What would be your advice?
I mean, if you wanna do this combination of bringing technology into artwork, um, try out, fail, try out, and fail and try out.
But what would be like the steps? Let's say the first three steps that you have to take. Let's say you don't know nothing. You don't know nothing. Like I just.
Having an idea
Mhm.
and following the way. So it's very depending on the problem. I mean, if you want to, I mean, it's not necessarily that you do a great computer work and it's not necessary that you're a good programmer. Therefore, and you need the concept, the idea of what it. Forget the technology. Forget all about that. Think about what do you want to show, to tell.
Can I have a follow-up question to this?
Yeah.
You're talking about concepts. I was wondering if there are some books or resources that you would recommend to learn about thinking.
So I like, but this is for me. There's no rule. So I would recommend to all the books that pretend that they tell you something about it. Don't read them. Read good literature, whatever. So for me, for example, for the siblings that never met, this was I'm not so good in names. I should know this, but this is really embarrassing.
I'm in the same club.
I think it's called The Third Policeman. It's a book from beginning 20th century, and it's surrealistic literature by.
Let me check it quickly. Brian O'Nolan.
That's strange. I had another name in mind, but whatever. There he described a machine in a cellar that was called the Eternity, and that this was the image for siblings that never met. So a machine in a space downstairs somewhere that was simply running. That was not being concerned about what people do around in the world.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for this conversation. I hope we can learn from this. I think as a choreographer that is somewhat interested in technology, I can follow your thinking process. And I hope our listeners can do the same. And if you like what you hear, please join our channel, subscribe to our channel, click a like, and share it with your friends. That was Mind Culture Podcast. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.